Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kiorkof, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're going to be covering the highly anticipated running back strength of schedule for the 2020 fantasy football season. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the channel, we talk about strength of schedule every single week here on the channel during the regular season. Whether it's my running back, wide receiver, quarterback, or tight end, starter sits during the week, we're always mentioning strength of schedule because we're always trying to find an upper hand or an advantage on a weekly basis for our players. Now, again, when you're determining two different players, perhaps matchups can be the big difference maker because, again, they may be playing against a defense that can't stop the run or cover the running back out of the backfield in the passing game. And we want to go ahead on a weekly basis during the regular season and take advantage of that. Now, we're not in the regular season and it's not week one yet, but in the preseason, I kind of wanted to give you guys an overarching view and a kind of a transparent view of what exactly we can anticipate in terms of running backs and their upcoming schedules in 2020. I'll kind of give you guys my explanation of my statistics that I've broken down and collected this offseason, how I've determined strength of schedule, and which players have the most advantageous positions going into the 2020 season who could potentially be guys that you can draft in the upcoming weeks. Now, strength of schedule is not the end-all be-all. The upcoming list that I'm going to show you should not determine who exactly you draft. Sure, if Christian McCaffrey ends up having a tough schedule this upcoming season, it doesn't mean that you avoid him at the number one pick. Christian McCaffrey is a matchup proof guy, and there's a lot of running backs, wide receivers, quarterbacks, and or tight ends that are matchup proof and will start every single week despite the upcoming schedule. Despite how good a defense is, the opportunity and skill of players absolutely make them matchup proof, and you should not be worrying about players like that are players that on a weekly basis are monsters. Now, for players that are on the fringe and you're really thinking about, they've got injury history or they're not getting a lot of opportunity, maybe this is a great determining factor for you personally to kind of think, all right, he's got a more advantageous position in terms of the strength of schedule this upcoming season. He plays against defenses that are on the bottom half nearly the entire season. I can go ahead and take advantage of that. And if he's always in a positive game script, maybe they're going to run the ball in the second half because they're always winning against these upcoming defenses. Regardless, this is the kind of thought process that we're going to go over. I'm going to kind of give you guys my perspective, the calculations and everything, and determine who exactly has the most advantageous position going into 2020. Now, before we begin, let me remind all of you, if you have not yet already, go ahead and go down to the description of the video, check out the information regarding Andrew Kiorkof's 2020 Fantasy Football Draft Guide, which is now available. Man, I look like a stud on screen. But either way, any information on that will be at patreon.com/Andrew Kiorkof. I have a video there, and I have a video here on the channel talking about everything that I'm producing outside of the channel in terms of content, whether it's that Discord that I'm using where I'm talking to players or talking to people that are Patreon supporters, and we're doing mock drafts, trying to help you guys out with all your draft strategy and your regular season strategy going into the 2020 season. All the information will be there down in the description for those of you looking for it. All right, so now that we've kind of determined that, we can finally get into talking about strength of schedule at the running back position. Again, strength of schedule isn't the end-all be-all, but for those of you who have been around the channel for quite some time, you will probably have seen this chart on the right of me many of times, and it shouldn't be something that you should be afraid of. This is actually one of our biggest helpers on a weekly basis, that determining which running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, or quarterbacks have the best upcoming matchups. Now, this is a chart that I took from week 17 of the 2019 season. So basically, the chart on the right of me encapsulates everything that was produced from weeks 1 through 16 of the 2019 season. So it doesn't include week 17, which a lot of you don't play in, so we don't have to worry about that. Perfect. So what I went ahead and did is I kind of want to explain to you what exactly this chart means. On the very top, we have the Carolina Panthers designated as the number one, which means the Carolina Panthers last season gave up the most points to opposing running backs on a weekly basis in a half PPR scoring format. They gave up exactly 29.25 fantasy points per week on average to opposing running backs, which means, you could have started anybody against that defense last season, and they were going to produce out of the backfield without a doubt in my mind. And that's what they did. The Jacksonville Jaguars struggled heavily. The Lions struggled heavily. Obviously, a lot of the teams designated with the green number next to them struggled heavily against the run, and we wanted to go ahead and take advantage of that last year, in which we did. Now, the teams on the bottom designated with the red numbers, specifically the New England Patriots on the very bottom with the number 32, gave up the least amount of points to opposing running backs in a half PPR scoring format on a weekly basis. New England Patriots giving up only 13.31 fantasy points per week on average. To kind of give you some understanding, last year I would have basically calculated this and put this number into the 2020 season and said that is going to be the upcoming schedule. But unfortunately, there are going to be outlying variables that we can't take advantage of. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. as of this moment in time, I went ahead and I took these numbers. Let's say, for example, you play against the Carolina Panthers. I'll designate that as a 1 on your upcoming schedule. If you play against the New England Patriots, I'll designate that as a 32. We'll total those numbers up. We'll divide it by 16, and we'll go ahead and we'll determine exactly who has the toughest strength of schedule. Now, we went ahead and did that, and though I do not believe, and I will say, I do not believe this is the best way of determining strength of schedule, I wanted to go ahead and show you guys this because if we had taken the statistics that we had saw from 2019, not including rookies or players that found new homes this offseason in free agency or retired, we would have potentially ended up seeing the the Indianapolis Colts and the Minnesota Vikings with the easiest upcoming schedule during the regular season, and the Tennessee Titans and Green Bay Packers having the easiest upcoming schedule in the fantasy playoffs. But like I mentioned, this is not the best way of determining strength of schedule because this does not anticipate rookies, new players, and retirements that happened this offseason and or injuries that have taken place. So what we'll go ahead and do is I'll go ahead and introduce my new way of determining strength of schedule. A little bit of a PFF approach, as it may be, of kind of giving you guys a better idea of what exactly the strength of schedule will look like. So what I'll go ahead and do is I'll bow out here as I explain the statistics on screen. So as you can see on screen at this moment in time, it's a little bit jumbled, but there's a lot of numbers to kind of manage. We're going to start with the very left, starting with the chart where the Kansas City Chiefs are at the very top at number 1 and the Pittsburgh Steelers on the very bottom at number 32. This is based on 2019 player grades, SOS versus the run. So basically, I went ahead and I kind of made the PFF approach in which I got every single grade of every single defender last season through 2019 and how good they were at stopping the run. After I went ahead and did that, I went ahead and totaled the 11 starters of that team this upcoming season, not last season. Like, for example, Calais Campbell, he used to play for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He is now a part of the Baltimore Ravens. I'm adding his run stop defense to the Ravens 11-man defensive total. And again, I don't want to hear this BS that corners and safeties should not be included in this list. Corners and safeties make just as many plays coming up and making plays at the line of scrimmage or in the backfield. Defense is an 11-man effort. All 11 defensive players, defensive linemen, linebackers, corners, and safeties are all included in here. But again, I have every single starter that is on the team as of this moment in time, 8/24/2020. So now that we've kind of determined that, I went ahead and I took every single score from all 11 starters of every team. I totaled that number, and that's where you see total defense. The Kansas City Chiefs having the lowest number and the Pittsburgh Steelers having the highest, meaning in terms of total scores, on average, we were going to see the Kansas City Chiefs with a lower overall average of stopping the run in terms of success in comparison to the Pittsburgh Steelers last season, based on the players that were in the NFL and where they may have ended up. So what I went ahead and did is I took this 1 through 32 and I plugged it into the 2020 fantasy football schedule. And if in fact you played against the Chiefs, you got a 1. If you played against the Steelers, you got a 32. And on average, what we found was that this upcoming season, based on this more accurate way of determining strength of schedule, the New Orleans Saints, the Los Angeles Chargers, and again, the Indianapolis Colts and the Bears, who were kind of similar to the last determining factor, are going to have the easiest strength of schedule for running backs running the ball. This is not a determining way of figuring out how they're going to do in the passing game. That will be covered next. But to kind of look on the screen, what we'll see in the middle is the upcoming SOS. Based on 2019 grades, SOS versus the run, this is our 2020 strength of schedule at the running back position when it comes to running the ball. Even though, and I know I'm going to hear it a lot, Saquon Barkley has the most difficult schedule this upcoming season, this should not deter you from drafting him. Saquon Barkley is a top 3 back, and he should come off the board accordingly. Plain and simple, it is not an argument to have. At this moment in time, all we're looking at is players that could potentially, this upcoming season, have an advantage in which they typically wouldn't, who need the advantage because they are not matchup proof players. So in specific, let's go ahead and let's pop me back up on screen here for a sec to kind of give you guys a little bit of an understanding, because I got to talk to you to make you understand this, I guess. When we look at the number 1 team, the New Orleans Saints, having the easiest strength of schedule this upcoming season, Alvin Kamara is still a matchup proof player. I'm not even worried about that. Just the fact that he has a easier strength of schedule makes it that much easier for me. And to kind of, put it in perspective, am I going to draft him over anybody else? Am I going to draft him over Zeke or Saquon or McCaffrey? Probably not. but he's still going to have an easy strength of schedule, and it kind of leaves me at peace. But when I look at Austin Eckler, Jonathan Taylor, David Montgomery, these are three guys that are going to have the three easiest strength of schedules outside of Kamara that are going to be able to take advantage of that this upcoming season. And that is an exciting prospect, especially because of the fact that you think about it, the Indianapolis Colts have one of the best offensive lines, if not the best offensive line this upcoming season. The New Orleans Saints have a top 10 offensive line. The Chargers have made pretty big strides in terms of improving their offensive line, getting two players back from injured reserve last season, bringing in Brian Bulaga, who's going to play the left tackle position. These are advantages that you want to see, especially for a guy like potentially David Montgomery, who was in the middle of the pack, low-end RB2, could potentially make a run this upcoming season because the games and schedules that he plays against this upcoming season are that much easier overall. Now, for players that are struggling, like a Saquon Barkley on the bottom, we shouldn't worry about that. Again, Saquon Barkley is matchup proof. Joe Mixon is matchup proof. The only reason he's gone ahead and sat down there on the very bottom of the list is because, as you can see where I was currently sitting, he has to play against the Ravens twice, which were the 25th best defense in terms of stopping the run in total grades last year. I mean, playing against the Ravens twice, the Steelers twice, that is nothing of an easy task. And that in itself is going to bog down his overall schedule this upcoming season. In terms of the New York Giants, I mean, they got to play the Cowboys twice. That is a pretty tough schedule. And then they've got a couple other extra games there that are definitely not easy. I mean, right out the gate, they got to play the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's week 1 for Saquon. And that is definitely difficult, but it's not going to deter me away from him. Now, before we go ahead and move on, I want to mention the screen on the very right, because again, you guys can go ahead and dissect this, pause the screen if you want, look at everything, determine who has the easiest strength schedule. On the very right, it's the fantasy playoffs. So from weeks 14 through 16, what exactly we can anticipate in terms of teams running the ball against defenses who can't really stop the ball in the fantasy playoffs. Derrick Henry's going to run rampant. I mean, the fact that Derrick Henry has a already top 9 schedule in terms of strength of schedule, the running back position, running the ball. He's not a receiving back, running the ball. Derrick Henry is going to feast throughout the entirety of the season. Whether it's during the regular season or in the fantasy playoffs, he can carry your team potentially. But I love to see the fact that, again, David Montgomery and the Chicago Bears are in the top 4 of the regular season and the top 2 of the postseason in terms of fantasy football, and that also Alvin Kamara is up there. These are great numbers to see. I'm potentially excited. I mean, we're seeing a lot of names that teams are in pretty precarious positions, but a lot of players are in advantageous positions, which I'm excited about. Again, there are, we end up seeing like the Green Bay Packers that are in the top 9 of both these stats. We see the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the top 8 of both these stats. These are numbers we want to see. Either way, I'll go ahead and move on and talk about what exactly we can anticipate in terms of the running back position against linebackers in the passing game. So what I went ahead and did is I went ahead and I calculated every single linebacker's coverage grade last season. Now, I understand covering a running back and covering a wide receiver or a slot receiver is completely different, but I went ahead because this is the only way I can determine it, and I took their overall grades from last season and I calculated it the same way I did with the other group. I got the total defense in terms of either the 4 or 3 linebackers they use, whether they run a 4-3 or 3-4. I took those linebackers, I took their coverage grades, and I divided them by the amount of players that are playing as starting linebackers on that team, and I determined the averages as such, being as the Arizona Cardinals have the worst covering linebackers and the San Francisco 49ers have the best covering linebackers. Now, you may be thinking, Andrew, didn't the Arizona Cardinals went ahead and drafted a first-round linebacker? Sure, but when I determined rookies, I went ahead and I just got a concrete rookie average grade in comparison to rookies last season, and I put it into this upcoming season because, again, they haven't played in the National Football League, and I cannot give them a objective grade. So I went ahead and I got the average of linebackers last year in their rookie season starters, and I went ahead and implemented that for upcoming rookie linebackers this upcoming season. Regardless, it's not really a surprise that the Arizona Cardinals are struggling heavily because they couldn't stop tight ends last year, and in the run or in the passing game against running backs, they couldn't really stop them either. So I went ahead and we gone ahead and determined that the San Francisco 49ers running backs have the easiest strength of schedule in terms of matchups against linebackers in coverage. Now, obviously, we're not going to be able to see Raheem Mostert take advantage of that, but potentially Tevin Coleman or Jerick McKinnon, but they don't really pass the ball to the backfield. The next team, we end up seeing the Indianapolis Colts with Nyheim Hines, who is an incredible receiving back who could take advantage of that. James White on the next team, Le'Veon Bell on the next team, James Conner, who, just like we talked about yesterday, is an incredible receiving back and can definitely produce when in fact his number is called. I mean, what was it? In the first 8 weeks of last season, the 7 games he played, he had 31 targets and 29 receptions. Incredible numbers there. Then we go ahead and we look at, the Seahawks, the Cardinals. We end up seeing a lot of players that we like that need a little bit of a boost in the passing game. They could potentially end up seeing that because their schedules are far easier against opposing linebackers who may not be as good at covering as regular linebackers. And then we go ahead on the very right and see teams against the fantasy playoffs in terms of stopping the pass and covering running backs. Pretty difficult for some of these teams, but overall, I think, in my opinion, looking at, the Kansas City Chiefs against linebackers who can cover. I'm not worried about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He is an incredible receiving back. He will tear them apart because he is one of these guys who will eventually be matchup proof, and I think he's not going to have to worry very much, and you won't have to worry about that this upcoming season. Regardless, you can go ahead and pause this, but we're going to go ahead and move back, and I'm going to kind of give you guys my final thoughts. Again, on today's episode, we covered everything. I don't really think that grabbing last year's strength of schedule and putting it into this year's upcoming schedule is a way of determining. I really do believe grabbing the PFF grades and kind of implementing it that way for all 11 starters on all 32 defenses, then finding the average in terms of stopping the run or stopping the pass in terms of the running back position. That is the best way of determining it, and hopefully you guys can go ahead and take some value away from the information that I've kind of had and divulged earlier today. Thank you everybody for watching. I really do appreciate you guys supporting the channel. If you have not yet already, click that like button for more content. We'll be talking about strength of schedule all week. If we can get to 100 likes, that would be absolutely incredible. It really does help me out a lot. If you guys have any comments, you can go ahead and hit me up down below in the comment section. Again, patreon.com is probably the easiest way to find me, where you can communicate me all day. You can literally talk to me on Discord if you'd like. Everything is possible through Patreon. It's probably the easiest and fastest way to get a hold of me for your upcoming drafts. If you need, strategy talk, all that kind of jazz, I will be there. Outside of that, we'll talk about more strength of schedules later on in the week. Hopefully everything helped you out today. Thank you everybody for watching. And until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.